Hello and welcome to part 3 of my interview with Marlin creator Scott Lahteine. Now if you've missed parts 1 and 2 of this video series, you probably should go and watch those. There's a lot of really good content in part 1 and 2 that if you missed those, you're missing a lot. So go watch those and this video will be right here when you're done. Now if you've already seen those 2 parts or you've just decided to watch this one anyway, welcome. I hope you enjoy this part of the interview. In this part we're going to be covering a lot of Klipper. The first, I guess, about half of this video is going to be all us just talking about Klipper, what it's meant to the 3D printing community, what our thoughts personally on Klipper are. So if you care about that kind of thing, this is the video for you. But beyond that, we're also going to be covering the Marlin Step Daemon, if you've never heard of that before. We're going to talk about power loss recovery, what that can do to your firmware. We've got Marlin Adoption. We were talking about the BIQU Hurakan. If you haven't seen that printer yet, I did a live stream on it. You should check that out. It's the first bed slinger that comes with Klipper firmware, so go check that out. We're also going to be talking about Scott's hope for Marlin and Klipper, along with a lot of other content here. So I hope you enjoy this part, and before we get into the interview, let me go ahead tell you one more time about GreenGate 3D, who is the sponsor for this video series. Now, if you've already seen those parts, you know I've already talked about how much I love GreenGate 3D. They are a top quality supplier for 100% recycled PETG. Now, if you've never used PETG before, don't worry about this. This is not scary filament. You can print this with almost any printer. This thing will print as little as 200 degrees and up to 250 degrees. So if you've got a normal printer that has temperature limitations, you can still try this stuff out. If you've wanted to try out PETG, you haven't known where to go or whether your printer can do it or not, go check out GreenGate 3D. What I've got right here is one of my favorite colors. This is the Mars Red PETG. It's this beautiful deep red color. This is a really good option if you're looking for your first spool. If not, they have a lot of colors, the whole spectrum of colors, all in PETG filament. So again, thank you GreenGate 3D for sponsoring this video series. If you want to find a link to GreenGate 3D, look down in the description. All the information will be down there for you. Now let's get on with the interview. We can go ahead and transition to Klipper and have a short discussion about Klipper specifically, because there's several things. Number one, Klipper has, in a relatively short amount of time, here's the thing, I think a lot of power users have made Klipper their default go-to. And let's be honest, input shaper and things like on-the-fly configuration changes have been a big part of it. They feel like it's easier to configure. I don't have to recompile it. I've got input shaper that's making all my printers faster and quality better and yada, yada, yada. So let's start on the high note. What do you think, we've discussed a lot of the features that Klipper has, input shaper, on-the-fly configuration. Anything else that you can think of that Klipper has done that you would love to pull in, that you've heard about, that you really think that they've done right and you would like to bring into Marlin?
Well, Marlin is kind of being monolithic and targeted to a particular setup. It's like one of the things it's meant to be rebuilt for a lot of stuff. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I do see the value in some more things being configurable, but not necessarily changing your firmware from a Cartesian to a Delta on the fly.
And people also have to understand that while if I were to take a Raspberry Pi that has that has Klipper on it, I can't just take it and plug it into another printer, because that host machine software still has to be rebuilt for Klipper.
Well, I do imagine it's you get a Klipper screen, right? You buy that from Reality now. That's a new option, and that has Klipper on it. And then there's a separate board that is the board that just receives the command and takes care of the motion and stuff, and has that part of the firmware on it. And that is as close to plug and play to as you could probably get. you know, and I can imagine you could take that, and if you had it set up just right, and there's probably some plugin, or there will be, where you can just immediately switch. Oh, I'm using, you know, printer number 3, and I imagine there's also the possibility to have multiple printers being run from a single instance of Klipper as well.
But to my point, I was making the point that I think that when they're plugging that into one of those host machines, it's flashing that host machine with new firmware.
I see, yeah.
You see what I'm saying? That it's not just communicating with the Marlin that was already pre-installed.
Right,
Klipper doesn't talk through Marlin.
No, it doesn't.
It's got its own host software. So my understanding, and I hope I'm right on this, is the way that that is working is that Creality has already built into that display what printers it supports. And my guess is when you plug in via USB, it flashes that firmware for you on your host machine.
Yeah, like I guess they know what all their boards are. So
exactly, and so if we want to support an Ender 3 S1 or whatever, we already have the host software built into our Klipper, and we are going to flash it. I assume that that's how it works.
Right, although those boards don't typically flash through USB; they're flashed by writing onto the SD card and then putting the SD card in. So it may be that you have to put the SD card that comes with it into your board.
Yeah.
To get the Klipper motion stuff on there first. Marlin actually has a thing like similar to it, which is called it's G6, and it's controlled by a daemon called Step Daemon, which is another project on GitHub, and basically that lives on the Raspberry Pi and then sends commands that are much low level to Marlin. And then Marlin doesn't have to do as much or hardly any of the calculations for motion that it would normally have to do. It's just sending over raw blocks for Marlin to process. And I think it's semi-abandonware. I don't know how much development's been done on the Step Daemon by Mr. Colin Argazzi, but he did a lot of work on it for a while, and seemed pretty enthused about it. And it was sort of it was definitely inspired by the Klipper concept of having, you know, a separate controller that takes care of all the hard math, and then that way it can have the board can be as fast as possible as far as handling the motion and interpolating the steps and stuff.
But from what we've been talking about, it doesn't even sound like that's necessary. I mean, we've been talking about the fact that by offloading that on these 32-bit boards, you're actually just wasting your 32-bit board for a certain extent. And that, to me, what you're buying by offloading Klipper to a Linux installation is that configuration change, that ability to reconfigure your Klipper, not really the performance benefits. It would be really arguable that there's any performance benefits if you took a Marlin that had the same feature set with a Klipper that had the same feature set, that if you took those took those prints off the printer, that you would really notice any difference in the quality of those two.
Yeah, I'd like to see more comparisons, really.
I've thought about that since I've had this machine sitting next to me. Like, I've gotten some prints off of it at certain speeds. If I took the same G code and ran it through, you know, do you notice any difference? Like, sure, there are motion differences. We know that the code is different. Yeah. But is this something that actually results in finer detail? Do you end up with less blobs or more blobs, given the fact that the slicer's telling it what to do?
Yeah, I mean, once Marlin 2.12 is out and with the input shaping, I really, really want to see more of those comparisons.
And that's what I would like to do as well.
Especially with, like, I'm sure Chuck would love to do that. Mr. Hellebuck, he's got, he gets out the microscope and really shows the details. He's done those kinds of comparisons before. And it would be really great to see, like, how it really stacks up. And yeah, I agree that, like, you're partially wasting the power of that 32-bit board because you're not filling up all this flash space that could be with code to do stuff, and there's probably not all the RAM isn't being used and all that. So, you know, the one thing is that in the future that means they can use less expensive processors with less RAM and less flash space.
Yeah.
For that particular board, the real advantage is you do get the nice fast speed, so you get the smooth interpolation, which is what you really want. So the faster your 32-bit board is, the better interpolation you're going to get. and also you all also want all that hardware on there for controlling the heaters and reading the sensors, and that information.
Oh, sure. Newer boards have more of those feature sets, not just the new processor, for sure.
Yep.
Yeah.
So yeah, so that board is actually also reporting that information back to the Raspberry Pi. So yeah, all of that comes together, and it adds some complexity. I imagine it probably burns a few extra electrons to run both of those boards, and you have to have a fan on your Pi typically, depending on your setup. So you're adding another fan and stuff. So it is a use of more power, but is the final result ultimately better? And is the user experience? You're only flashing the firmware a couple times here and there, maybe. And once you've got I think, if you got 2.1.1 and it's working for you, you don't need to necessarily upgrade. There's not.
Well, and that's what I try to explain to people when people go, you have 193, 2.1.1 is out. Why haven't you released a new one? Or I'm like, well. Yeah. Unless you can point to something that 2.1.1 has that 193 doesn't, that you really feel like you need, that's why I haven't released a new version. People don't need to flash just because you release a new version of Marlin.
Yeah, and I would say it's usually better to have the newer version of Marlin.
Sure.
Because we do fix things, but also once in a while there's some glitches, and so you want to maybe wait. Not get 2.1.0, but wait for 2.1.1 actually turned out great. 2.1.2 is going to be even better. And I'm certainly, I have no idea what 2.1.3 is going to look like yet. But we've certainly got a pile of get more fixes, optimizations, and improvements, and new boards and things. So,
but
that's all coming together.
Back what I said. I mean, I'm really looking forward to doing some tests to find out what's different. For example, I've got a print that just finished actually while we were talking, and there are some artifacts on it that I don't know where they've come from, because the G code shouldn't have left artifacts there. And this is one of those great cases for me to be able to go, well, if I take the G code off of this machine, put it, if I had the exact same machine or even a very similar machine running Marlin, what am I going to be able to see difference with the exact same G code?
Well, just make sure that power loss recovery is turned off while printing from SD.
Of course, I don't even compile that into my version of Marlin. I don't like it.
Yeah, it's not my favorite feature either.
I have UPSs on every printer that matters.
That's good. Yeah, I mean, if you have the ability to connect your UPS to a detection pin, so it notices when the power goes out.
Yeah.
That makes power loss recovery actually work, because it can actually park your head and everything.
Is that code in Marlin?
Yeah, you can. It's better when you have an actual power loss detection circuit, because it can actually respond.
I know Big Tree Tech sells one.
Yeah, and that's a great thing, because otherwise it's just writing to the SD card every layer or every so often, which is not good. Because SD cards are slow, and it makes your print pause and that.
Yeah. Well, see, and that's what I'm seeing on this print, which is running Klipper, is I've got these little dots that shouldn't be there, and I'm trying to figure. I mean, I don't think they're doing anything like that SD write. With Klipper, that shouldn't be a problem, because the co-processing is on the Linux board, and you shouldn't see artifacts. But I really don't know where these are coming from, and so I'm real curious.
Sometimes it's just wet filament. It's just because there's a little bit of water and it's causing the filament to do little pops. It's occasionally. That sometimes is. If it's a little curl coming off the side, that's usually something like a pause.
Yeah.
So that's when you think, it's probably power loss recovery or something like that.
Yeah.
So isolation is always fun. Isolation testing. But yeah, I can't wait. I definitely can't wait to see how it stacks up. And I really do feel like. Yeah, for people like Marlin, rather Klipper, and use it, more power to them. It has a nice, interface, UI, and all that. It gives you a much more direct connection, though. But it's not necessarily, I don't think, greatly superior to OctoPrint as far as that experience goes. And OctoPrint can do some really cool things now, of course, like multiple instances running multiple printers on the same.
Well, and the number of plugins available for OctoPrint pretty much fills in any gaps that anyone's ever had with OctoPrint up until this point. And I think well, and there is OctoPrint for Klipper at this point.
It's an offshoot,
No
I
doubt.
believe.
No
So,
doubt, no doubt. And that's why not? It's a great interface, and if you can intercept the G code and do the fancy tweaks like arc welder to it,
yeah.
that's great. But I guess those would be probably better served as native Klipper plugins and stuff. But I'm sure those are coming.
Well, and I
But
use it in the slicer. I've got the arc welder in the slicer, so
nice.
that probably works as well.
Yeah, and I've been picking up my Python and stuff, so I would love to play with more of those things as well. And I've done a little tweaking with OctoPrint plugins in the past and stuff, so it'd be fun to play with those things and experiment with them and get the feel for what's going on. And I mean, I'm definitely devoted to Marlin. I'm stuck with it. It's stuck with me. We're stuck with each other. So one way or another, I have to keep it relevant and keep it improving and make it worthwhile. And I think the main thing that makes it worthwhile is just that you can have it running on that one board, and it'll take care of all and you can still have the that high quality and extra speed and all that stuff. So that makes it, to me, and the fact that you can just put it on a printer without having to add any new hardware to it and all that, immediately make it better. That to me is value.
And that was something I wanted to mention. I mean, when we're talking about Klipper, Klipper, there are a lot of the people that have switched to Klipper, and for them it wasn't a big deal. To them it was easier. To them, buying a Pi or something Pi-like, because Pis are, hen's teeth these days, or just really expensive hen's teeth, however you're getting them. But to them, that was a very easy solution. Like, Marlin doesn't work for me. I can't figure out how to compile Marlin. For whatever reason, Klipper documentation and Klipper was just an easier solution for them. But let's be honest, it is a more expensive solution. It is a more involved solution because you have to get a Pi or something Pi-like. You have to install it on there. You have to then install new firmware onto your printer that interfaces with Klipper. You may end up having to buy another display if you don't want to only access it via the web interface. Like, there is expense, there is a learning curve. And so, back to what you said, people have done this to me and in my threads. People do it to you on Discord. And Klipper Klipper converts are going around and jumping in and going, Klipper is for everyone. Everyone should be switching to Klipper. Why is Marlin still being even worked on? And to me, that's a very short-sighted view of things. That's saying because it worked for me, everyone should switch over to it.
Sure.
But they're ignoring the costs. They're ignoring the time, and it.
And
Dealing with
to go vegan, like I keep telling them.
exactly.
If you're gonna switch to Klipper, then for Christ's sake, go vegan, man. What are you doing?
To your point,
be consistent.
It's not for everyone, and it doesn't solve everyone's problems. I think people do forget that not everyone that owns a 3D printer is going to become a power user. Not everyone that owns a 3D printer wants to compile their own firmware, which is why I release new versions of Marlin for Ender 5s and Ender 5 Pluses, because they just want to use their machine. They just want the latest features. Yeah. Going back to what your desire was, boy, wouldn't it have been nice if Creality was still releasing firmwares to these, because that's all people want, is a machine that works and does the job.
Yeah, and and if it happens to have, glitches or whatever, they want to be able to make it work with the latest upgrade or whatever. And that's kind of, that's certainly part of our role. We couldn't just go away, because then somebody's going to be stuck with some old version that's buggy, and maybe we fixed it, and maybe we improved the configuration or fixed that too. So yeah, there's many relevant reasons for Marlin to stick around, and it does feel a little, obviously it's just plainly rude when people come into your support group where people are like, hey, help me fix this thing in Marlin, and suddenly someone pops up and is like, Klipper. Like, the topic is, this guy can't figure out why his heater is, not heating up. Let's fix that. Switching to Klipper might not be the solution for this guy.
Well,
to just,
well, and could you imagine if that person that came into the chat and tried to say, go to Klipper, can you imagine, okay then, if you think Klipper's the solution, I want you to take this guy who's having heater problems, and I want you to tell them what they have to buy, walk them through installation, walk them through fixing their problem, only to find out that it wasn't connected correctly to the board.
Sure, who knows? I mean, I talked to Kevin about this, Kevin O'Connor, again, author of Klipper, folks. Met him at Earth, nicest guy you'd ever meet, and definitely a nerd's nerd. He loves to talk shop, and I had a good time talking with him. I do too.
Right. Yeah.
And we discussed a little bit about this phenomenon, and he finds it troubling as well. And his view is that it is exactly what we're saying. It's relevant, and it has its place. It's his project, and he's passionate about it. He created it for his own reasons and for his own edification as well, because it's fun, right?
Right.
And,
Absolutely.
The same thing. Marlin was originally created to fill a niche, to get for Ultimaker to have a better firmware, and it continues to be improved as a result of just a wide interest in the fact that at a certain point it started to really take off, and it just became the de facto thing shipping on all the printers, and it still is super relevant in the sense that it's going to be, well, especially during things like a chip shortage, right? It's just easier to have a single board than to buy two.
Yeah.
And so and there are other all kinds of good things about it, like and if we could run it through a giant like AI filter and have that AI learn from it, and then spit out a new firmware based on the old Marlin, and it's good that it's there, and we're fixing it up and making it nicer for the AI. There's a lot of good reasons to keep it going, and it is a bit disheartening if people come along and try to give the impression or tell me that what I'm doing is like no longer relevant, because whether it's relevant or not, I'm stuck. I got to keep working on it. There's a lot to do.
Let's be honest.
Endless amount of stuff to do.
Marlin is still on. It has to be 99% of the printers on the market.
Yeah, I would think.
I mean, Klipper is still a power user's toy. I mean, this printer sitting right here next to me from BIQU is the first printer that I'm aware of that comes with Klipper on it. Which means that every printer that Creality has produced, every printer Ultimaker produced, every printer produced up until this point has shipped with it.
Yeah.
Right? From the consumer market.
Sure, for the most part, a few rough wrap firmware printers out there.
Exactly.
Certainly some Deltas came out for a while.
Exactly. There is a Klipper Delta as well.
Yep. And Marlin is definitely all over the place. And I'm actually very excited to see boards that are they look like your traditional board. They're not, extra huge, and you don't have to stick a pie on it with a hat or anything, or have a separate connector. If it's all on one board, I think that's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, that's what's in this machine. What's in this machine has the Pi replacement as well as your 32-bit board all in one.
It gets me thinking about how could wouldn't it be fun to play with that and have Marlin run on the STM32 side or whatever, and then have something else, just whatever, any program we want, running on the Raspberry Pi side, and we can use it for whatever debugging purposes and stuff like that.
Well, I mean, this would be a fantastic machine if BIQU wanted to turn it into it, which it would be a Marlin OctoPrint solution.
It could
all
be,
in
actually.
One, right?
I believe it very well could be, actually, even as it stands now. You could
that's my point. I don't see any reason that it couldn't do that.
Yeah, first time I've thought about it. Thank you for bringing that up.
So maybe BIQU should send me another one, and I'll get a Marlin on it, and I'll have this one with Klipper, and then it'd be a great side-by-side comparison.
Yeah, I'm gonna talk to Gina about that.
I will talk to my BIQU folks and see if they'll hook me up. I've had a blast working with this one, and like I said, it's my first experience with Klipper. It's been really easy. BIQU did a really good job of integrating it into a machine that has at least shown that Klipper doesn't have to be just for power users. Like they've made it very easy. But I want to leave this discussion of Klipper on the high note that you've mentioned, that the maintainer of Klipper has mentioned. It's what I've talked about, that there's nothing wrong with all of these things existing in the same world, that one of them doesn't have to supplant the other one for supremacy. that this idea that because you're having problems with one, it means that one's bad, and this one worked for me, so that it's good. It's like the idea that Toyotas are great and Chevys are crap because I don't like Chevys, but my Toyota's been a chief car this whole time.
Yeah, and I mean briefly, one of the things that we also discussed, Kevin and I, was that there's this, one of the, if it's a problem, I don't know if it's a problem, but one of the things is, of course, Marlin has zillions of settings, most of which you'll probably never look at or touch. But they're there because, someone needed to have this thing be there and to be configurable. Right. And so, there's a lot that can be hidden. And so I think about that a lot. And again, with that, the UI I'm building for editing configurations right in the editor there, the idea is to, again, hide what you don't need to worry about, make it so you can just type in a little filter box and it'll show you just what you want to see, probe, just the settings that have probe in the name or whatever. Right. And you can just pay attention to those things and ignore the rest. But it's partly it's a two-edged sword. You want to have as much flexibility as you can in the system and make it as configurable as possible to meet the needs of the users that wanted those things. But then also you want to make it so that those things don't bog you down and you can just focus on the few things that you really do care about, like the size of the machine, how fast it moves, and where the pins are and what the pins are and stuff. And so that has been, again, if you compare it to the past to now, although things have gotten more and more elaborate, I think we've done a better and better job of making the user experience of the build and configuration better over time. And certainly the documentation inside the configuration file is a big part of that.
Sure.
It's just the best place to keep it all together.
Well, and like you say, I mean, even things like your warnings or your pre-processing that you do to make sure that people don't make common mistakes, all of those go into building a better firmware.
Yeah, ultimately. Yeah. And, I wish I had much more time to put into like making the documentation and stuff like that. Right. Even as I was mentioning that, like scripting stuff with the config.ini, again, part of that was it's doing the filtering of the config and spitting out the schema, but I also wanted to spit out exactly the files that I would then deploy on the website as documentation. Since we have all the documentation in the config file, all it really needs to do is just turn into Jekyll.
Kind of like
into HTML and blah, you got pages and searchable and all that.
What is that called? There's this doc something. I'm going to draw a blank on the name of it.
Header doc?
Huh?
Doxygen?
Doxygen was what I was thinking of. Yeah, something like Doxygen, where you build it into the code, it generates your documentation for you.
Yeah.
It saves you a step because you only have to write documentation in one place.
Yeah, and the only thing is that's the downside of Doxygen is that it spits out HTML, but I kind of need stuff to be in Jekyll,
right?
Which is YAML format. And so, yeah, there's a bit of YAMLing going on, and also JSON. A lot of JSON and YAML and INI. Those are the three formats I've been pulling my hair out about lately. It's just generating lots of
we
INI.
could have a whole, I have my opinions on those things because I have to deal with those also. So that's a separate discussion. I'm a JSON fan myself.
Yeah, and I mean, it's so close to being in a database, but it's not. It's so close. It's just that's the next step I really want to get to, because if we could have it all in a database, geez, that would take care of us. That would be neat. And then to be able to just spit the things out as we need them. And then, also, so people have built these online build tools as well, and that's been a big part of, like Marlin, you can go and there's crc.marlin.au or something like that. But you can find it. It's a Marlin configurator online, where you can download binaries that have already been built, get the binaries you need, and there's and if you want to have like subscriptions, you can sign up and pay money. But it's worth, and it may be worthwhile for some people if they're managing a lot of printers or if they just want to make things easier on themselves. It's more like a donation to just keep the website going because it's such an awesome project and really making a great attempt to wrangle this stuff. And so I think we can work, and I really like the guy who's running it. He's really awesome. And there is also there's another one by, I want to say, oh, what's his name? Oh, well, if you search for Marlin configurator stuff online, you'll find them. But he's got a Kickstarter and not a Kickstarter, but a Patreon and stuff. Oh gosh, I'm so sorry, I can't remember your name at the moment. It'll come to me. It'll come to me as soon as this is over, as soon as we're done. But yeah, there's a lot of cool tools like that to kind of take the pain out of building. And there are people who will help you as well. If you go to our Discord, I mean, people will build you a firmware if you really need it, give you a binary with all pre-built. So if you're really that stuck, use the Discord and come and take advantage of the help that's there. Occasionally,
I'm going to make sure that
and
I'm going to make sure that the Discord links and the links to get to some of these things. I'll work with you. We'll get these in the description of this video so that people can find it easier, so they don't have to go searching for it. I know you know some of them because you work with it every day. We'll get some of that in the video description so that people can find it easier.
Yeah. Of course, we keep those links up on the Marlin GitHub page and other places. So shouldn't be too hard to find.
I think that Marlin, what I'm looking forward to short term as Input Shaper comes out, right? As some of these, I guess, obvious things people jump on why Klipper, not Marlin. I'm looking forward to some of that to disappear and make it a little bit harder for people to try to say that Marlin's not up to stuff anymore, because let's be honest, Input Shaper is one aspect of a much larger piece of software that does a lot of things. And so it will be nice to have that parity for people to not latch on to something so easily.
Yeah, I can understand the desire, especially for things like, as we see the magic and power of artificial intelligence now. It's like you kind of do want to have something you can hook up to your printer that catches that spaghetti when it happens, or that print failure, that can tell that your first layer is perfect or not by using a camera. I feel like in a way that particular thing might be a little bit overkill, but it's a way to get auto calibration in there and stuff. And people want it to be just completely just one button plug and play, just like our paper printers are, and all our other devices. You don't want to have the possibility of 20% possibility of failure. Out of every 5 prints, 1 fails. That's not good. If your paper printer did that, you would throw it out the door. I'm really anxious to get the reliability out. That's a big one. But as far as that goes, some of it is a little bit out of our reach as a single board, running on an STM32 that doesn't have a camera attached, that doesn't have AI, running on a Linux or something like that doesn't have OpenCV. Those things will become possible in time.
I was going to say, I think that as you start thinking more about multi-threading, multi-core STM32s, and taking more advantage of those, then you can start looking more at adding some of those add-on features that don't interrupt the process of printing, and build more power into it.
Right. The things I would hope for is really, really well-trained and optimized neural networks, because currently, and maybe even a chip on the board that does that, because right now it's your Raspberry Pi is running in the gigahertz range, and most of your print boards are running in the 200 megahertz range at the middle range, and then some of them are even going 300 and maybe up to 500 later. Yeah. Maybe we'll even get a gigahertz. Who knows? Yeah. But and of course with BIQU putting those together on that board, I mean, I'm not just thinking about Marlin and OctoPrint, but all the plugins that are possible for OctoPrint would include things like AI.
Right.
And
but people also need to understand these aren't things you get for free. They either have to exist in the cloud, meaning you're subscribing or paying for some service, or you're buying extra hardware because something has to do the processing. All of these things are coming at some cost.
Sure. And then there's hard to get standardization around that. If you've got 1,000 different printers with different shaped nozzles and their fans are over here, some are over there, some have a probe here. Like, where do you put that camera? You know, it's going to be different on every printer, and so you're going to have AI that can handle it being in all these weird places. So there has to be more standardization around that stuff.
Well, and as those things come around, Marlin and Klipper will have to standardize certain things that if they're going to both coexist in a new ecosystem, there will have to be standardized protocols, standardized understanding of how a machine running Klipper and a machine running Marlin are performing and what to expect out of them.
Sure.
There's a lot of collaboration that has to happen in order to make a universe of different firmwares and a universe of different physical hardware. How are we going to make these things all interrupt together?
I know we've done a good job, I think, of keeping things like G-code pretty well wrangled.
I think so too.
Whenever we want to add a new code or some new feature that has a new G-code, the first thing we'll do is go to the RepRap wiki and see whether it's used or not. That's kind of been our meeting point for all that, is just the old RepRap wiki G-code page that everybody uses. And
as you add them, do you add it? Does that get implemented into the RepRap G-code page?
Yeah, I'm always updating that page.
Okay, good.
I've done a lot of cleanup on that page, actually, the whole thing, because it was kind of messy at times. Yeah, I'm a bit of a stickler for bad formatting and stuff. I want inconsistencies, so yeah, I've spent a lot of time on that and fixing up that page and a few others on RepRap wiki. But yeah, but that's a place that's the one place we coordinate both, all the firmware makers, the major ones, all four of us, I guess. Prusa, RepRap, Firmware, Klipper, hopefully Klipper. Come on, guys. I hope you're spending time on the G-code wiki page, guys. Love you. And who else is there? RepRap, Firmware, and Prusa. Yeah, just the big four. So yeah, those, and then there are a few others in there that are no longer really relevant as much. Replicator G and things like that we don't even think about anymore, that have their own G-code. And so we're building standards around that. And then I've talked with Tony Locke and others of Duet about more stringent standards around G-code and stuff, like just the format we use and how we deal with quotes and escaping of characters and handling of Unicode, or if that comes up, and other things like that. And building basically a standards document for that, similar to the NIST document for CNC style G-code, which is different. It's very different.
Well, and you don't want
it's inspired by
you don't want that splintering of the community at some point, because once you've splintered, it's work to come back together. Because that means someone's changing their G-code, someone's having to adapt to a new standard that they didn't take into account. So it's definitely good to keep the communication open during the process and keep everyone working together. I don't think people that are quote-unquote power users don't understand that we want these communities to continue to function together, that we want them to continue to get along, because it benefits everyone if Klipper continues to exist, if Marlin continues to exist, and if they continue to work together.
Absolutely, and I definitely am not, my view of Klipper is not at all colored by those few Klipper bros who feel the need to come in and hijack my groups. That I'm inspired by what's being done with Klipper. I'm inspired by RepRap Firmware. I'm thoroughly inspired by just the fact that we're all like pushing plastic for fun, and that's our job.
And as you said, and as people know, competition, and in this case, hopefully friendly competition, actually makes everyone's software better.
Absolutely, and certainly, just the challenge of someone gives you an idea, and you are like, how am I going to do that in my little project? And I see how they did it, but I can't do that.
Right. No, it's a new challenge for you, but it allowed them to go off, make it work, show that it works. Yeah. Now, while you were doing something else, tackling some other challenge, now you know that is something that's possible. That's something that yields results. Now it's worth your time and energy to implement that into your code base.
Absolutely. And a lot of times, I kind of do avoid looking too closely at how it's been done before.
Oh, I don't blame you. I do the same thing. Yeah.
I sometimes think, well, if I follow some naive solution and I come up with some idea of how to do it, and it turns out to be really optimal and clever, and does the same thing, but doesn't involve as much of the, like, maybe I will have discovered something by mistake, you know?
Right. Yes.
And so it's
I
like,
understand.
it's sometimes more fun to just challenge yourself. Hence the, reading all these papers on the theory and learning my calculus and trying to understand the notation. Because, yeah, it's like I really want to understand these things at a deeper level and understand the theory behind them. And it took me, I have to learn to until I can actually express it in plain English, I don't feel that I really understand it.
Right.
And so once I finally got grokked, like the input shaping concept, I just can't stop talking about it because it's just such a cool idea. But wait till you get into the more complex ones with more and more variables and stuff. That gets even crazier. But I was even thinking, heck, we'll just insert white noise. That should do something, right? That'll cause it to resonate in such a way that everything will be shaky. And maybe you want that, maybe that's a plug-in to make everything look fuzzy. It makes all your lines a little bit shaky.
Cura has that. They've got that. Add fuzzy texture to the end of it.
Oh, I heard about that. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So we can do that in the slicer. I don't think we need it in the firmware.
Yeah, maybe not in the firmware. The closest, I don't know if I've gotten anything close to that. I've thought about doing things like, what if you could scale things in the firmware?
Sure.
You could just say, hey, just print this 2 times bigger. Under certain circumstances, you could.
Yeah.
With certain models, because if you know that you just push more plastic and make everything proportionally larger, but there'll be gaps and things because if your lines are bigger, so are your gaps. Your gaps are bigger too. So
your models would not turn out exactly the way you expected them to. That's for sure.
Yeah, we can do one. There was a request for rotating, like being able to rotate at any angle. We don't have that, but you can shift it around.
Mm-hmm.
Also flipping, like reversing.
Right, which is done on the IDEX printers.
Exactly. Like, what if you could just do it with any model? Wouldn't that be nice? You have one model on your card, but you can print it twice and have 2 bookends that are mirrors of each other. Why not, right? So yeah, there's all kinds of options.
But as we've talked about, anytime you come up with an idea, even though you can do it in code, you still have to develop a user interface for it. You still have to let people know it's there. They have to know how to use it without shoving the print off the side of the bed when they've duplicated it. I mean, there's variables here.
Like backlash compensation? What's that? We have it, but are you going to use it? How does that interact with things? We don't know. But
so
all those kinds of
anything that we haven't discussed? I feel like we've been going for almost 3 hours here. So anything we haven't talked about at this point? And if not, we'll go ahead and wrap up with some last minute details here. But
briefly mention, I was at Earth and it was fun. I was really inspired by that experience. Although for myself, it was a little bit stressful. I couldn't get good food, and I was just really over. And none of my buddies who are YouTubers or otherwise promote 3D printing to the community bothered to stop by and say hi and ask me all the great questions you've been asking. Of course, we would have been. I guess we would have been standing there for hours. So I guess this is better, right? But I really wanted to talk. I really definitely wanted to announce and let people know about the new stuff, like especially the input shaping and the fact that we're still here and we're still relevant and we are still improving, and that if you do upgrade, you're going to get a better experience and so forth. I definitely wanted to get that stuff out there. So, so it's great to have had this opportunity with you. I should also mention, I'm still living by crowdfunding, and Marlin's still supported by crowdfunding.
Yeah, that was actually one thing I wanted to make sure we covered. How can let's go in real quick. We'll step through it. How can people find Marlin, and let's go and talk about how are people able to find what you're working on, where the release notes, that kind of thing first.
Well, let's see. I don't keep a blog or anything. I was writing on Patreon occasionally at one point. But it was becoming a bit redundant, hey, new things. So I do try to keep in touch. But in general, there's like a Patreon for Marlin Firmware. Generally speaking, if you go to GitHub to the Marlin page, people can support Marlin directly through sponsorship through GitHub.
Okay, great.
Monthly or one time. And then I have a donation page that's linked on my personal website if people don't like those options. Some people didn't like Patreon for a while, and And some people prefer to just go through like something like PayPal or whatever. And I guess there's a new platform that's coming along, so I'm going to be exploring that, which takes fewer royalties and stuff. That'll be another option for people, so that more of your donations will be able to go. There's also merch and things like that.
So as you're saying, you do Marlin Firmware full time. This is your full time job, and
it is.
And thanks to the support of companies that are using Marlin, thanks to the support of users of Marlin, that is how you're able to continue to contribute as much to Marlin as you are, as you have been this whole time.
Yeah, the pace of development would be nothing like it has been, and I'm sure we would be, in a whole different place if it weren't for the fact that I've been getting funding and not having to work full time at any other job.
Oh, sure.
This has been, it's fun, but it is a lot of. Sometimes it's very tedious, so it is a real job. Having support from companies has been especially has made me feel especially good. But of course, having the support of the community is even more amazing, because some folks just they contribute like 20 or more a month, and it just blows my mind. Where they're not running a company necessarily, but they're getting enough value out of it that they see that what we're doing is worthwhile, and also maybe just the enthusiasm about the fact that we're an open and community-based and completely volunteer-run like thing,
Mm-hmm.
and yet we're like making such great progress and doing so much. It's just amazing. So I mean, I can understand that. I mean, it's enthusiasm. The enthusiasm around it is definitely understandable. I mean, when I first encountered it, it blew my mind that this thing existed and we could build machines ourselves and just deploy this on there and have it work. It's just never ceases to amaze me. So yeah, it's like the reward is definitely many layered, many tiered. I wouldn't have been able to go to IRF this year if it weren't for the funding that I've been getting. And although it was expensive and I did not really recoup from the event itself, the idea was really just to kind of get the word out there. And I wanted to be, to see what's going on and get back in touch was the main thing. And I definitely did that. I had a lot of really great conversations with people and just, especially people coming up and just thanking me for what we've made and just telling me about the things they've done with it. And it's just been, it's always, that's the thing that gives me the biggest thrill, is just knowing that people are really, really using this thing and enjoying it and getting some value out of it. And every time I watch some, YouTube video where someone's going through, hey, here's a new setting, and I'm like, hey, I was part of that. It's like, it's just the greatest thrill, to actually, in a way, to exist, and have an effect on the world. So many of us feel like what we do is redundant or meaningless, or it's just to support our little personal bubble and keep our roof over our head. I'm able to do all this, and I can go anywhere and meet up with people and collaborate and make great new things happen within this little realm. And it's just never a dull moment. Honestly, it's a great thing, because I went far afield from funding to fields, but truly they're all tied together.
No, and yeah, I completely agree. I mean, it's nice to have the community support. It's something that I experience too, because I think the majority of the funding that I get through Patreon or anything on this channel is because of the support I give to the community. Not even because of the videos I make necessarily, but because people find me, I help supporting, I release these versions, these copies of firmware that people use, and that community feeling is, even to me, because I don't make my living off of it as you're having to, or as actually you're blessed to, is that, the fact that people are interested in what I'm doing, that want to contribute to what I'm doing, that means so much to the whole process.
Yeah, absolutely. And so thank you guys, everyone in the community.
Yeah, absolutely. And with, we talked about putting links in the description. Gals. Yeah, guys and gals, excuse me. I use it in the the multitude term. But, along with the links that I'm going to put down here for where you can find more about Marlin development, where you can find some of these auto generators, things that will help you to continue to get the most out of Marlin. I will obviously be including all the links to support Marlin, as well as Marlin-related projects such as OctoPrint. We'll include all that down in the description because all of that helps support the community. Everything grows. Everyone can continue to work on these projects.
Great.
And I contribute to Marlin because I like to give back to the community that has given me so much, in terms of hobbies, in terms of just a community to be a part of. It's been fantastic.
Absolutely.
And I appreciate you taking your time. We've been here a long time. I'm probably going to end up breaking this down into like 3 separate videos so that people can digest it.
I suppose, yeah. I mean, or you can edit it in a really clever way where where all just seems to go like fly like a perfect interview. Yeah, and I'm trying to do in terms of keeping in touch. I am trying to do like a regular stream every Saturday on Twitch, which is Twitch. So you can find me there under Thinky Head, and that's like I try to do like Saturdays 6:30ish, because I guess there's other 3D printing stuff that goes on Saturday afternoon.
Believe it or
so I
not.
don't want to step on that. Yeah, and then so that's one way that people can come along, and like I do support that way as well.
Okay, great.
People can come and ask questions and interact, and it's always a great time. So
and as you said, Discord. Direct route to you, direct route to other people that are interested in helping out with all of your various 3D printing problems.
Yeah, absolutely. I never, even though I'm here in my little room coding all the time, I'm never alone. I have Discord here, and I'm always checking it to see if there's some question I can answer or whatever. And then all the other outlets are also here, so that I'm always kind of definitely trying to not be isolated. I don't want to be like one of those.
I know that feeling. Yeah,
disappears. So.
As a work from home developer of the company that I work for, I understand that feeling of needing to make sure that you can continue that staying in touch with people. It's really nice, and people need to understand that not every call for help. We sometimes enjoy them. Like, it's nice to know that there are people using it. It's nice to know that we're being useful and that we can help others. So reach out, to the community when you need help. Don't just sit there and feel like you're the only one that's having this problem. Don't feel like you're the only one that can't figure this out. I promise you, there's tons of people. Reach out to your Facebook communities. There's a bunch there. There are communities on. I'm going to forget all the different places. Every social media platform probably has a community. So reach out to them.
Absolutely. And guys, whenever you run into something that seems like it's impossible and the worst thing in the world, the worst problems always have the simplest solutions when it comes to software and technology. For some reason, it's always like, oh, you just take it and plug it in. Or it's usually the simpler thing. So yeah, when you're really stuck, we've all been through it, and there's always somebody who knows what to do. So
absolutely,
don't miss it. Use it.
So to everyone that has stuck around all the way through this and has listened to all the things that we've had to talk about, thank you to all the viewers that have stuck through this. I hope that you get all the use out of what's coming down the pipe for Marlin. I think we'll probably talk again maybe in a few months, maybe after Input Shaper has come out. Maybe it's gotten a good amount of use. We can see how it's shaping up versus Klipper, and what people think now that this new feature's here. That I don't know if people never thought it would happen, but it's been in the works and now it's here. Yeah,
it's happening. It's gonna get better. It's only gonna get better from here.
Okay, fantastic, and thank you, Scott, for taking the time here. For I know me and you both, we really enjoy nerding out like this over the things that we're passionate about. You're passionate about Marlin, about 3D printing, but I do appreciate you taking the time to sit down with me and talk about all of these things.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to do it. Okay.
Well, that's it for today, and we will see you guys next time we get together.
So no big outro on this video. That about does it for my talk with Scott. I hope you've enjoyed this video series. Let me know down in the comments below if there was anything that I missed, if there was anything you particularly liked. Just leave me a comment. Let me know what you thought about this interview overall. And I would be totally amiss by not mentioning my Patreon supporters who make all of these videos possible, as well as my support of the community. I'm going to have them scrolling by here one way or the other. So thank you to my community members, my Patreon supporters who are scrolling by here. I really appreciate your support. And thank you to all of you who have watched this video series. Again, as always, I am Chris. This is Kersey Fabrications, and I will see you in the next video. I've got a lot going on here, and I will see you soon.